Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate Yom Haatmzaut, Israel at 74. Chag Sameach. Here in Israel, we have spent the past few weeks in a kind of soul-searching, cheshbon nefesh. Although we celebrated the past 24 hours with concerts and gatherings, the build-up to today, as a people and as a nation, has been challenging. From Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day on the 27th of Nisan to Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers of the wars of Israel and victims of actions of terrorism on the 3rd of Iyar, the days are incredibly sad and tough for the Jewish people and for Israelis to process. These are days of national soul-searching. In recent years, I find myself beginning to take stock of our nation's souls already on the eve of Passover, while asking myself questions about the meaning of the freedom of the Jewish people in their land. And while observing the mitzvah, and you shall tell the story to your sons and daughters, I am reminded of my family's personal exodus story from Soviet Russia to Israel in the early 1970s. Precisely then, while reading the Haggadah, we quote the sentence from our national anthem Hatikva, to be a free people in our country, and ask, what is between freedom and independence? This year, also just before Pesach, I traveled to Ukraine's borders with Poland on a humanitarian mission with other Reform rabbis, cantors, and leaders from Israel and North America. We went to support refugees in need and help in any way we can. We led a Pesach Seder there for volunteers and refugees, mostly women. It was joyous and hopeful. And despite our hearts heavy and broken with the tales we heard and the reality on the ground, we came back to Israel, and our movement was here, already mobilizing Seders for other refugees and new immigrants who arrived in Israel. Thanks to the emergency support from the World Union for Progressive Judaism, we held 8 Pesach Seders and continue to support those who have arrived in Israel and have escaped the war with legal aid, spiritual and emotional rabbinic counsel, and humanitarian aid. Many of our rabbis and leaders are at the forefront of Israel's response to what's happening in Ukraine. And these are the stories and reflections we have asked to share with you tonight. Israel's Declaration of Independence states, "We call upon the United Nations to lend a hand to the Jewish people in building its state and to welcome the State of Israel into the family of nations." Now that our sovereignty over our country is an existing and obvious fact, we need to ask ourselves, what is our role as the Jewish state towards other peoples in general and peoples in distress in particular? We asked all our speakers to consider the following questions. What does Atsumate, or independence, mean for you this year? For me, independence this year is a guidepost, leading us to our place and our role for the rest of the nations of the world. And now, I'm honored to invite our first guest speaker to share with us her expertise and insights into the war unfolding in Ukraine. Senia Svetlova is a well-known journalist, political analyst, and expert in Middle Eastern affairs. She is a senior research fellow at the Institute for Policy and Strategy, Interdisciplinary Center Herzliya, and senior policy fellow at the Mitvim Institute for Foreign Policy, and a former member of Knesset with the Zionist Union Party. Senia, thank you for joining us tonight. We would love to open with your overview of what is happening now in the war in Ukraine and how you see its impact on the state of Israel.
Shalom. What a wonderful place to be with friends, with people with whom we share common views and beliefs regarding our beloved country, Israel. I'm so very thankful that you begin your ceremony with discussion on Ukraine. because as we move on with our lives, celebrate our holidays, and basically, enjoy what the peaceful life, even with some turmoil that always a part of our daily reality here in Israel, but still a generally peaceful can give us. We know that children and elderly people, men and women, are suffering. Some freezing to cold. Some do not have enough medicine. Some bleeding to death simply because they are encircled by the Russian army. Are right now in Ukraine. We are living through a historical moment. It's a watershed moment because it defines very well the good and evil, right from wrong, black from white. If the colors were a little bit blurred during the last few years, when many states, including Israel, cooperated well with Russia, nevertheless, the atrocities that happened here and there, some in Syria, some in Chechnya, some in Georgia, right now Israel is finally, we are talking about independence, then yes, Israel is seeking to become independent because there are concerns, there are threats, there are interests specifically on our northern border the way of a major superpower. Yes, Russia is still a superpower, and yes, it does have this button that everybody is talking about. For Israel, I think also because of close affiliation with Ukraine, also because Israel, although it is in the Middle East, but it is a part of collective West, and as such, it just couldn't allow itself to keep mum, to keep silent, to overlook what is going in Ukraine. And slowly but surely, step by step, it was not immediate. It was not an immediate Israeli response, but we do see on behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, other ministers from the government, of whom I'm so proud for standing on the right side of the history. We do see that Israel is getting closer to the place where it should be from the beginning, the place of the collective West, the place where you support the human rights, the place when you denounce the evil, even if this evil is very mighty. And I think that there is no much perfect time to talk about it today in Israel when we celebrate our independence, our sovereignty, our might, and our ability to defend ourselves among anybody who would want to take it away from us. We have this. Now it's time also to help others to allow to enjoy their independence. And of course, I'm not talking only about Ukrainians, but also about our immediate neighbors, the Palestinians.
Yeah. To relate to our discussion to the state of Israel, we see you as a respected thought leader in Israeli media, and you were also a member of Knesset. Despite all the challenges, we in the Reform movement in Israel and joining us today are Reform Jews from the diaspora, lovingly and unconditionally celebrate the independence of our country. I want you to ask you to share in a few words your vision for Israeli society in light of our 74 years of existence today.
I was so thrilled when I got this invitation, from the Reform movement to participate in the ceremony in this very special event. This year I will celebrate 31 years in Israel, and we were always discussing with my mother, when do you become an Israeli? Because when we made Aliyah, then I think that it's common among many olim. You refer to yourself as different, and you are different from those who are already here. They are the Israelis, and you are not. Although you also have the Israeli citizenship, you have equal rights to those who are already here. And this moment on when do you start to feel that you are actually part of this country, or as our Minister of Foreign Affairs, and back then he was a journalist, he said, what is Israeli to you? How do you define this? So I think that you start becoming Israeli when you participate not only in the present, but also in the crafting of the future of this country, by building your family here, by contributing, to the progress and flourishing of this incredible country. When you go to the Knesset, as I did, jumping into the hot water and doing it because you understand, you feel that, well, it's also your own responsibility to be there, to try to make things better. And even though it's hard, it's unbelievably hard and difficult, as many of my fellow member of Knesset who will be participating here today know. But you have to do it. And I think this is this moment when you understand that you have a vision of what Israel should be for yourself, for your children, for their children, and so on. I'm dreaming of Israel that enjoys much more equality than it is today. It's an equality in every possible sense, in an equality between women and men. It's an equality between newer Olim and Sabras who were born here and so on. It's an equality between different communities that comprise Israel. It's an equality between Jews and non-Jews. It's an equality between different currents of Judaism here in Israel. It's an ability to exercise your faith in the way that you believe in it and you feel that it makes you belong. It's in your circle. There are ways to make our life in Israel more equal. It goes through changing the political stigmas, the political rocks that sometimes you feel that you just cannot do it. But actually, I look at this past year of this government and I see that despite the tremendous difficulties, they are trying to really, push this mountain a little bit of the impossibility and to make things possible through various reforms, through various discussions that never were a part of our discourse for the last 10, 12, or even more years. And this is definitely the way, by activism, by taking, by acting for what is right. And I'm looking at the reform movement, and I'm looking at Women of the Wall, and I'm looking at the various civil organizations in Israeli society that, by everything they do, but everything they say, by discussions, by raising what is right on the agenda, they are moving Israel to this better place where we want to be already, but probably we will just get there in the future.
Thank you, Ksenia. One final question. We're asking of all our speakers and partners to share with us tonight in the context of what is happening today in the world. What does independence, Atsumate, mean to you?
Well, it's a great question because, we are dealing with this question. I think when we're dealing with this closely, when we are raising our kids and we teach them to be independent, also from us, but also in the society, to stand for what is right, to go against the peer pressure. And what we are teaching our kids, it's what we should be basically teaching ourselves as well. As a state, as a small state, a brave and a strong state, but still quite a small state, sometimes it's not easy to become independent in making the decision, independent in our opinion, independent in standing up and saying, yes, this is tough. It can get me even to some trouble, but I will have to do what is right. It means that in Israel, for people who believe in two-state solution, justice between Jews and Arabs, it means it's going against the stream and continue to pushing for what we believe is right, to still say the word peace, even though it's not fashionable anymore, to talk about equality, even if some people will laugh at us, at the political correctness and so on, to continue doing this independently, respectfully of others, but still independently and not succumbing to the pressure that all of us individually and us as state, we are feeling sometimes just looking at the goal, all eyes on the goal, on the final goal. Final goal is to keep your humanity. Final goal is to keep, the moral ground on which our state was established. And this is right for our, treatment of the refugees that are coming here from Ukraine or from other countries. And this is, of course, right when we are talking about treating the other, respecting the other, but also doing what we believe this is right for us, for our communities, for our personal selves, and for our state.
Thank you, Ksenia, for your insightful and engaging thoughts. Chag Sameach, and I hope you enjoyed the day today.
Thank you very much. Chag
I'm
Sameach.
Chag Sameach, you're welcome to stay with us. I am now excited to open our program to our movement rabbis and partners who will share stories, prayers, and music, starting with student Rabbi Miriam Klimova, who traveled with me to Poland, is herself originally from Ukraine, and now serves Kehilat Shirat Hayam, one of our 2 Russian-speaking congregations. Miriam, bevakasha.
Good evening to everyone. Like you said, I was born and grew up in Ukraine, but I learned the Israeli hymn in kindergarten in Lviv, in Western Ukraine. I didn't know what this country looked like, but I always thought that if so many generations have dreamed of Israel for so many thousands of years, it must be really beautiful. Today, when I think about what independence is, I think it's like an air. We don't pay attention to how many breaths we take in a minute, 15, 20, in a day maybe more than 20,000, but when there is no air, our life is not possible. Today in my home in Israel, I breathe independence. This year, more than even I understand with every breath I take that independence, it's not something to take for granted. It is built by work of those who for 2,000 years have not given up hope. It's guarded by those who are willing to give their lives for peace of others. Independence, for me, I feel it's the soul of every country, and I want so much to say every morning, מודה אני לפניך שהחזרת בי נשמתי. I'm a student rabbi of community of Russian-speaking Israelis. Many of our relatives and friends now live in Ukraine and Russia. My mother and father live in Ukraine now. And every day we pray for peace to come. Like hundreds of thousands of other Israelis, I feel that I have 2 homelands, and to the inhabitants of each of them, I wish to breathe independently, freely, without fear for their lives, to dream and to build their future by their own hands. So please, you everyone, join me in prayer for peace. Prayer for peace for Ukraine and for Israel. Можливо, знають лиш мандрівні птахи, коли висять вони між небом та землею цю біль 2 батьківщин. Боже, благослови наших близьких та друзів, Пане всіх створінь, за великою милістю Твоєю бережи усіх жителів Твого світу. Простягни над ними покров миру, звільни їх від ненависті та ворожнечі, утверди в серцях усіх людей землі любов і братерство, людинолюбство та мир. Нехай збудуться невдовзі слова Твого пророка, не підніме народ на народ меча, і їм не доведеться більше вчитися воювати. אולי רק ציפורי מסע יודעות כשהן תלויות בין ארץ ושמיים, את זה הכאב של שתי המולדות. אלוהינו, ברך נא את קרובנו וידידינו, אדון כל הברואים ברוב חסדך, הגן על יושבי עולמך, ופרוס עליהם סוכת שלומך, הסר מקרבם שנאה ואיבה, ותא בליבם אהבה ואחווה, שלום ורעות. וקיים במהרה חזון נביאיך, לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. Amen. And Ukrainian song, folk song, The Prayer for Peace. Rade Bože chlieba, Rade Bože chlieba, Rade Bože chlieba, чтоб країна квітла, щоб країна квітла. Роди Боже хліба, щоб країна квітла, щоб країна квітла. Дай нам, Боже, сили, щоб були у мирі. Дай нам, Боже, сили, щоб були у мирі, щоб жили у мирі. Дай нам, Боже, сили, щоб жили у мирі, щоб жили у мирі.
This year, Yom Haatmzaut bring us new meanings and we address new challenges. The European Union and the World Union for Progressive Judaism create the Ukraine Fund for this crisis. We want to thank you, everyone, for our extended family of the World Union around the world for supporting with donations, with solidarity, and with open hearts to help our brothers and sisters from the Ukraine communities of Progressive Judaism. We visit them in Pesach with the Sedarim with our communities around the borders, and we are so proud to help them in this challenging time. Also to welcome them to Israel, working together with the IMPJ from this Klita, and wishing them to a better future. We pray for peace, and we hope to celebrate a Yom Haatmzaut for Ukraine, liberty and freedom. We wish all of our brothers and sisters that they keep going with our values. עם ישראל חי. אנו מאחלים לכל אחד מהמשפחה המורחבת של איגוד העולמי ליהדות מתקדמת, שנחוק בקרוב בימינו יום עצמאות לאוקראין, ושיהיה שלום על אוקראין, על ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל. חג עצמאות שמח.
Shalom v'chag Atzmaut sameach. Thank you, Sergio, for those powerful words. I'm Rabbi Josh Weinberg, and I'm sitting here in New York wishing the entire Reform movement around the world a Chag Atzmaut sameach, because this year on Yom Haatmzaut, we're not only celebrating our own independence, but we're helping to fight for the independence of others, especially those in Ukraine. And I think about what we at the Zionist movement tried to create, and that was the notion of a new Jew. But 74 years later, it's our time to actually create a new Judaism, a Judaism that is creative, authentic, open, tolerant, and compelling. This new Judaism that evolves our religious civilization and struggles with and adapts to the challenges and opportunities brought on by modernity, and of course, the questions that come with Jewish sovereignty. That's what we are doing together. And this notion of independence, this 74 years of celebrating the state of Israel as a Jewish state, gives us an opportunity as a worldwide reform movement to be the co-creators of Jewish life together for the next generation. You and I will be able to actually change the world. And I invite you to sing with me. Oh, I guess we'll be singing Al Kolele. Okay. על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, ביתנו התינוקת שמור אלי הטוב, על האש המבוערת, על המים הזכים, על האיש ששב הביתה מן המרחקים, על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על הכל נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה, השיבני ונשובה אל הארץ הטובה. שמור לי על זה הבית, על הגן והחומה, מיגון מפח ופתע וממלחמה. שמור המעט שיש לי, על האור ועל הטף, על הפרי שלא הבשיל עוד בשנה, וסף סינגלה, כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק. מרשרש אילן ברוח, מרחוק נושר כוכב, משאלות ליבי בחושך נשארות עכשיו. אנא שמור לי יד בולע מאחורי נפשי, על השקט ועל הבכי ועל זה השיר. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על הכל נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה, השיבני ונשובה אל הארץ הטובה. חג שמח.
Shalom Chaverim. It's wonderful to be here with you, and it's wonderful to have all of you here with us. I don't know whether you can see me because I can't see anyone behind me, but I want to wish everyone a Chag Atzmaut Sameach and tell you just a little bit of my own journey. First of all, I made Aliyah from Toronto, Canada when I was just out of high school, literally out of high school. I had been a chanich in a Zionist youth movement in Habonim, and straight out of high school decided to come here on my own, and have lived here since high school years, having family here, have had a career here, and I now have the honor of serving as the head of the chair of the IMPJ. I was often asked when I was studying at university by my classmates, why did I leave the comforts of Canada to come to Israel? There was a joke that went around in Canada, I think in Israel as well, about Moses, the stammerer, who, when he was thinking of where he wanted to go, was thinking of Canaan or Canada, and instead went to Canaan. And I can't say to you how happy that I have made the choice that I've made here. It's where when I was asked that question, I often expressed the fact that I felt and feel most at home here. I will have a stake in what happens here. I want my family and my children to grow up here, and I have no regrets about making that decision over 40 years ago. Independence for me is living in a country that is in such a robust democracy. And like all other democracies, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, but it is our democracy where we have the ability to influence what is happening with our votes and with our actions. And it makes me proud to be an Israeli in that sense. We are able to control our security, we're able to control our civil life, and and that independence also flows into what I am as in the reform movement, what we are in the reform movement. The independence, the ability to struggle for part of that democracy to be better, for a place where all Jews can feel at home at all times in all facets of their lives. But it's also the independence of a movement that has values and sometimes goes against the flow. Right after the war in the Ukraine broke out, we at the board of the IMPJ, I think being the only religious organization, religious movement in Israel to do so, came out with a very firm statement saying Israel must be on the right side of history, must make the right decisions, and must put the blame for what is happening with the party that is to blame, that is to say that get off the fence and make the position that Russia is responsible for what is happening. It was also our position that to call on the government of Israel to bring in, as a Jewish state with the history of what we as Jews have gone through, it is our responsibility as a nation to allow as many refugees, and whether they be Jewish or not Jewish, to enter the state of Israel. Those are some of the actions that I am very proud of. There are many others, and it's an opportunity to wish all our friends around the world a very happy Yom Haatmzaut. It is also my honor now to call on my friend, my partner, Yaron Shavit, who is the deputy chair of the executive of the Jewish Agency and a former chair of the IMPJ, to be our next speaker. Toda rabba chaverim, v'chag sameach.
Chag sameach, Yair. Yom Haatmzaut sameach. It's my honor and privilege to share with you a few of the things that I've been going through the last 48 hours, representing all of you on behalf of our political arm, Artzenu, and the artzes around the world, in the position of deputy chair of the Jewish Agency for Israel. This morning, I was the chair of the judges at the Chidon HaTanach Lenoah Batfutzot, the quiz of Tanakh for young adults from all around the world. And I enjoyed during the words of blessings that I congratulated all of them, to share with them that I'm in this position as a representative of the Reform Movement and the former chair of the Israeli Reform Movement. And this is a Klal Israel movement, the Zionist movement. I think that since end of February, actually February 24th, it's important for all of us to realize what the Jewish Agency has been involved in and been doing in assisting Ukrainian refugees in general, and of course Jews fleeing from Ukraine to Europe and then to Israel as making Aliyah. I'll share with you the latest data that I have with me so that you'll understand the extent of the numbers of things that we've been dealing with. There were more than 100,000 approaches over the phone to the Jewish Agency by different refugees around the world and families. The Jewish Agency is at the moment holding 5,000 hotel beds around 15 points in Europe, in Ukraine and around Ukraine for refugees and potential Olim. We've been handling 11,810 flights of Olim to Israel. 13,000 buses were mobilized by the Jewish Agency. It's actually, I was very proud to be chairing the effort to mobilize the Israeli public, the Israeli society, to assist in gathering essentials for Ukrainian refugees. My team actually made by Nitzan and myself and 7 other Jewish Agency employees that we recruited managed to mobilize, you wouldn't believe it, 350 tons of equipment, 2/3 of which have already been sent to Ukraine and to the areas around, to the countries around Ukraine, mainly Moldova, Romania, and Poland, for refugees. The numbers at the moment are that there are 27,318 people that entered Israel from Ukraine, and 22,437 entered from Russia as we speak since February. From these almost 60,000 people, 33,000 have asked to make Aliyah. So I would just like to share with you the deep appreciation that I feel that we have a state of Israel and the Zionist institutions in situations like that. I think that answering or responding to Anna's question about what does independence mean to me, it means a great opportunity, but also a great responsibility. In order for us to be able to fulfill this great responsibility, it's important for me to mention how much we rely on the force of world Jewry around the world, as it is actually the task of world Jewry 74 years ago to establish the state of Israel and to stand behind the Zionist movement. It is now the task of world Jewry to help Israeli society. In this sense, it's so important for us to be supported by the Zionist reform friends, from liberal, progressive friends from all around the world, in order for us to be able to help shape the Israeli society through IMPJ towards the values that we stand for and believe in. So I lift my glass in L'chaim for all of us helping the state of Israel turn and become more pluralistic and more open. Thank you.
Anat Hoffman, the director of the Israel Religious Action Center, and one of my real-life heroes, teaches. Zionism is not a spectator sport. It is participatory. Normally, when I share this teaching, I do so in the context of encouraging Jews around the world to not just leave Israel to the Israelis, to actively participate in the Zionist project, in celebration, and sometimes even with rebuke. But for today, as I'm reflecting on what Yom Haatmzaut means to me this year in particular, it seems that this teaching can likewise be applied to celebrate the important Zionist work done up and down the country by the many, many wonderful and dedicated individuals who are contributing to our Israeli movement's effort in the response to the war in Ukraine. I couldn't think of anything illustrating Anat's teaching more powerfully. It doesn't matter whether you're a rabbi, a lay leader, or just an ordinary congregant. What matters is that you participate. And so, as we celebrate today the state of Israel, with the traditional words recited at the torch lighting ceremony, Oletifaret Medinat Yisrael, to the glory of the state of Israel, let me add, to the glory of each and every individual who contributes to the sacred work of our Israeli movement. Yom Haatmzaut Sameach.
Good evening, friends. It's actually very right to say Chag Atzmut Sameach tonight, because really tonight starts the 5th of Iyar, Hey Be'Iyar, the day when the independence of the State of Israel was proclaimed. It was actually declared on Friday, and specifically today, the Israeli law says that when Hey Be'Iyar falls on Friday, it should be put a day earlier. So we're celebrating a long, long Independence Day this year, as many years before, hopefully many years after. I think that's a very important question that Independence Day puts in front of us, actually put in front of me from my early age, before I made the Aliyah from Ukraine, was the question, where do I belong? Because when we celebrated Israeli Independence Day in Ukraine, which, just to remind, Ukrainian independence is a bit younger than Israeli independence. People who saw us, who experienced us, celebrating us, are you challenging our independence when you're celebrating independence of the other country? Maybe it was one of the reasons why I decided to make Aliyah, not to feel such dissonance about where do I belong. And this year, when I'm going to celebrate my personal 20 years in Israel, more than half of my life, on February 24th, the question of belonging was challenged. Again, I pained country where I do not live for 20 years, not just as a free citizen of the world, but also as a Ukrainian Jew. And I think that this holiday, this festival of Israeli independence, actually teaches us this year that we can belong in different places together. We can be Israeli and we can be Ukrainian. Even if we are not from Ukraine, like me or my colleague Miriam, even if we are free citizens of the world. That is why this weekend we can think about who we are, where do we belong, and what can we do to strengthen our feeling of belonging. Chag Atzma'ut Sameach.
As Israel turns 74 this year, we feel enormously grateful that we have a Jewish state With Putin's brutal war against Ukraine filling mass graves and forcing millions of refugees to seek shelter outside their country, Israel has such an important role to play. We appreciate those Israeli leaders who have raised clear moral voices in condemning Russia's monstrous aggression. As Elie Wiesel taught us, we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. On this Yom Haatmzaut, we deeply feel the interconnectedness of our global Jewish people, all responsible for one another. We all have critical roles in keeping our people safe and free. For 74 years, Israel has been a beacon of hope, and this year we especially appreciate Israel's unique role in Jewish life. It feels fitting to conclude with words from Naomi Shemer's Shirat Asabim, which was inspired by the Ukrainian spiritual master Nachman of Bratslav. Uchshehalev min hashira mitmale umishtokek el Eretz Yisrael or gadol azai nimshach veholech bikdushata shel haaretz alav umishirat asabim naaseh nigun shel halev. As the heart awakened with the grass's song fills with yearning, then when the song-filled heart yearns for the land of Israel, a great light from the holiness of the land is drawn toward it. Thus, from the song of the grasses is born the song of the heart. Yom Haatmzaut Sameach lekulam.
חג עצמאות שמח, חברים יקרים. Together with you, dear friends, we celebrate the great achievements of our beloved state of Israel. And yet, we all know that unfortunately, also in the coming years, young Israelis will be called to guard our country. The strength of Israel's defense forces and all other security bodies was always based on three foundations: the quality of our soldiers and commanders and the quality of their tools of war, the support they receive from the Israeli society and the Jewish world, and their ability to preserve moral standards in the face of a challenging and complicated reality. We are all committed to sustain those elements, all three of them, and to strengthen them, alongside with initiating true efforts to bring peace to the promised land and all of its children, and to all nations around the world. מי שברך אבותינו ואמותינו, אברהם ושרה, יצחק ורבקה, יעקב, לאה ורחל. Bless the soldiers of the Israel's defense forces, and everyone who stand guard in order to protect our people and land. May the Holy One of blessings protect them and save them from all troubles and afflictions, from all sickness and injury, and send blessing to all their endeavors. May the words of our Nevi'im, the prophets, come to be realized through them. ככתוב, וכיתתו חרבותם לעתים וחניתותיהם למזמרות. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war anymore. עוד ישבו איש תחת גפנו ותחת תאנתו ואין מחריד. And let us all say together, Amen.
Amen. Chag Sameach. I'm really moved that all of you joined us from all around the world to be part of this Yom Haatmzaut, to be part of Israel in your way and from where you are. Yesterday, as my congregation in Caesarea, Tfilat Adam, incidentally the same name as our Siddur, we had the Havdalah between Yom HaZikaron and Yom Haatzmaut. And it was a most special one because we had 4 families of refugees from Ukraine who are in our little town and who are being hosted by people in the community. And to sit there and read Megillat עצמאות, our scroll of independence, the vision of our founding leaders. When some of us read it in Russian and also some in English, brought up to our heart the real meaning of independence for us. That we are a country that can invite people in. And we are the place where Jews can come when they are in need, when they choose, like Yair Lutzstein has told us that he has done, but also when they are in need, like these new people. And I saw these women only, like most refugees here. And I saw these women, and of the 10 people, 10 women, one had a broken Hebrew. And they didn't have the language to speak with us. They needed translation. But they were with us in heart. And they are the very continuation of the building of this country, of creating a country and a land by waves of Jewish deciding, choosing, or having to come to this country and build it anew. And I want to read the prayer for the state of Israel that is in Tfilat Adam, our Siddur, our Reform Siddur, that you should know is just now coming out in English. צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך נא את מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו. הגן עליה ברוב חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך. שלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, לשופטיה ולנבחריה. ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך, למען ילכו בדרך הצדק, החופש והיושר. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם ישועה וחיים, ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה. פקוד נא לברכה את אחינו ואחיותינו בית ישראל, בכל ארצות פרוזוריהם. תא בליבם אהבת ציון, ומי בהם מכל עמנו, יהי אלוהיו עמו, ויעל ירושלים עירך, אשר נקרא שמך עליה. הצל מרוחך על כל יושבי ארצנו, הסר מקרבנו שנאה ואיבה, קנאה ורשעות, ותא בליבנו אהבה ואחווה, שלום ורעות. וקיים במהרה חזון נביאך, לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה, ונאמר אמן.
Thank you, Gilad and Ayala, for leading us in these important tefillot from our new Siddur, and to the rabbis working on the English translation that we were able to include tonight. At nearly every event of the IMPJ, and certainly before concluding our Yom Haatmzaut celebration, we sing Israel's national anthem, Hatikva. Tonight, though, it is no exception. I hope its message of hope resonates with you even stronger than ever this year. It feels like we need it more than ever, as do many around the world. I invite you to listen and sing along to this very special rendition of Hatikva by Konstantin Kotelnikov, an opera singer and trainer by profession, a chazan and community coordinator for Kehilat Shirat Hagan, another of our Russian-speaking congregations and originally from Ukraine. Following that, we have a short invitation to join us in Israel in June at our upcoming Veida Biennial from our Vice Chair Leslie Zaks, who is also chairing what is set to be a dynamic and moving 2 days of connecting, praying, singing, and learning. The URL is at the bottom of your screen to register. And then Gal Stern, student Rabbi David Azulai, and Shani Milo from the Yozma Ensemble in Modi'in will close our night with Israeli songs to end our evening on a musical high. I want to thank everyone who contributed to this event and to all of you for joining us here tonight to celebrate. I also want to take a moment to thank the many donors, including some of you here with us tonight, who donated to our efforts to support Ukrainian refugees who are now in Israel. I invite you all to partner with us in continuing to provide support to the thousands who are now here in Israel through our rabbis, kehilot, and special programs. Please stay with us to the end, and Chag Atzmaut Sameach. Konstantin, bevakasha.
עוד בלב פנימה נפש יהודי הומיה ולפתי מזרח קדימה עין לציון סופיה עוד רוב תקוותנו התקווה בת שנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון ירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון ירושלים.
Shalom friends, my name is Leslie Sachs, and as the chairperson of the Israeli Reform Movement Biennial, I'd like to invite you all to join us to the large, exciting gathering which will be taking place on the 17th and 18th of June in Shfaim. You can find all the information about registration on our site, and we hope to see you with us.
So, hello, good evening, and Chag Sameach.
חג שמח.
חג שמח. קהילת יוזמה. יאללה בלגן.
יאללה.
נבוא עלי הרים רגלי מבשר שלום בבניין עירך נבוא עלי הרים רגלי מבשר שלום בבניין עירך
כל צופייך עשו כל רינה הם להרים תוך מרינה עין בעין תראי שכינה
נבוא עלי הרים רגלי מבשר שלום בבניין עירך לשבויים דרור בשיר ומזמור אל בית הרמור ישב ילך סולו סולו את המסילה פיצחו רננה ותהילה יבוא מבשר בלשונו מילה קומי עורי כי באורך נבוא עלי הרים רגלי מבשר שלום בבניין עירך שא עינייך אורי בנייך באו אלייך לאור באורך תחת חושך אשים לך אורה אז מציון תצא התורה הנה גדול הוא היום ונורא ביום שימי חתר לראשך ונבוא עלי הרים רגלי מבשר שלום בבניין עירך נבוא עלי הרים רגלי מבשר שלום בבניין עירך ביחד כשהשמחה בלב פורחת, עולה עולה, אנשים ביחד גדול וקטן, כמו קשת בענן. זה לזה רוצים לגשת, יחד מבקשים לחלום, איש לאיש רוקמים פה קשת, 1000 צבעים לשלום. כך באים לשיר הלילה מארבע קצווי עולם, השמחה בלב לא די לה, רגע שלו לכולם. עולה עולה, נשיר ביחד כשהשמחה בלב פורחת, עולה עולה, נשיר ביחד גדול וקטן, כמו קשת בענן. והשיר גובר בינתיים, מקרב את הלבבות, מלאכים פורסים כנפיים ונדלקים הנרות. עולה עולה, נשיר ביחד כשהשמחה בלב פורחת, עולה עולה, נשיר ביחד גדול וקטן, כמו קשת בענן, כמו קשת בענן, כמו קשת בענן, כמו קשת בענן.
חג שמח.
חג שמח.